quick show before we start talking. Like the stream, share it with your friends, engage your chat, super chats if you got them, memberships if you got them. I parasocially love you. Thank you for being here. How are you, Pisco? You setting up, or
good,
should I be quiet for a minute?
No, we're good. We're good. Everyone can hear. Wait, talk something. Say something.
Hello, hello, hello. Good to see you.
Yo, what up? What up? What up? Why are you such a bad bro?
In reference to what?
I don't know. In general.
My parents were super smart. I was an angry stoner in high school. I had a chip in my shoulder, and that got worse with the Marine Corps. And then
you had a chip in your shoulder.
Yeah. And then also same thing with law enforcement. Basically had like 4 years of, I was professionally paid to have people talk endless amounts of shit to my face, and me keeping my job was reliant upon me not beating the fuck out of them. And so now that I'm like done being a cop and done being a Marine, I want to talk endless amounts of shit. And yeah, that's about it.
Yeah. So what's going on with you in terms of this political corruption stuff? So you seem to be consistently calling it out from Trump. That's kind of what I wanted to talk about and to really
yeah, it's like comparing jaywalking and fucking murder, dude.
Yeah,
like listen,
yeah.
I can still go back and say, hey, Hunter Biden did the metaphorical equivalent of jaywalking when it comes to political corruption, but Donald Trump increasing his net worth via cryptocurrency within the past year by $3 billion when he was only worth 4 to begin with is fucking, it makes the Biden story look cute.
Yeah,
it's like
have
quaint.
I have no. There's a little bit of an echo. Just heads up.
I'll mute myself when I'm not talking.
Okay, word. So I have no doubt that you have a degree of scale in your mind, which I really appreciate. But I really want to hammer down on the Twitter files thing real quick. Maybe there'll be an easy conversation. We can move on. But it's something that I wanted to get into.
It might be because I took some hydroxyzine today, which is like a pill that? Like it's an antihistamine, but it makes you like chemically incapable of having emotions. And so I'm going to be like super descriptive, where you're going to be like this, and this. And normally I get pissed off and yell at you, but I'm probably not going to today.
So you're not going to be very emotional today, is what you're saying?
No, you can get it out of me. Yeah. I trust you to make me emotional, but I'm saying like you're operating at an advantage.
Okay, so let's start with Twitter files real quick, because obviously, folks, what's in the news has been the kind of pressure campaign that Trump is waging on in the aftermath of the Charlie Kirk shooting assassination on various different actors, ranging from Jimmy Kimmel to immigrants to individuals who are being like encouraged to be canceled. And then we have a bunch of executive orders targeting certain groups, Antifa, targeting certain ideologies, and basically blaming the left. And it's in that context that there's this response when we say, hey, authoritarianism, hey, First Amendment, hey, this is unjust, which is like, you guys are reaping what you sow. And I'm first, I guess, curious, I guess I'll ask a question is, do you believe that? Is there a part of you that's like, hey, the left is reaping what it sows, or maybe not the left, Democrats are reaping what they sow because they did X, Y, Z. And so this is comeuppance. Even if I don't agree with it, it is, in a sense, to the smallest extent, maybe, or to some extent at all, just desserts.
Yeah, well, yeah. So I would say yes, but I want to caveat it, which is effectively like 15 to 21, I suppose, would be where conservatives were complaining about like censorship on social media, or why can't I talk about the election, or why can't I talk about COVID, or why can't I talk about how Michelle Obama is a fucking man, or why can't I use like anti-trans slurs. Like that was like the peak was 15 to 21 before God, why can't I think of his name? Elon Musk bought Twitter. That was like the pressure cooker that I think caused this Trump backlash, or the conservative backlash. However, I will say again, the conservative backlash is murder compared to jaywalking. And I can get into details on that.
Yeah, so let's walk through it. So on the one hand, I think that you'll find agreement with me that there was some of this cancellation gone too far. in terms of the exuberance of some on the identitarian woke left or whatever you want to label it as. I found it on my college campus in like the 2013 through 18 19, what, I'm not going to specifically put a number on it, but that era where I was even writing articles in my student newspaper being like, this has gone too far, we should let white people wear sombreros. And I lost some friends actually because I took the position. There
Fucking
were some people who called me
you
an
fucking racist piece of shit.
an Uncle Jose because I'm betraying Latino people because I say that.
You're gonna let me walk around in a sombrero, drunk,
no,
unchallenged?
So, I was totally fine with that. So there was a sense of it where I felt there were aspects of the cultural stuff that went too far. They were like trying to get the IMF chairperson not to have like speaking events at campuses and essentially acting like jerks a lot of the time. I think a lot of that's conflated with Me Too, where there are some cases where it doesn't seem clear to me that they should have been quote unquote canceled, and others where it seems quite clear they should have been canceled. And so basically, that's my sense of what happened there. There's some exuberance, some things gone too far. Talk me through your take on that, and then let's do the comparisons.
Yeah, and I'm being. Oftentimes people think that I'm trying to put like some moral weight onto it when oftentimes I'm being descriptive. I'll tell you if I'm putting moral weight on something. But AK Badasoy says, is he talking to Pisco or reacting to Pisco? No, this is a live conversation. And what did you challenge me on yesterday? Or not yesterday. What did you challenge me on last week? Just real quick, because we kind of like summarized the scenario and then we moved on. I just want to catch up AK Badasoy real quick.
Twitter files stuff, or are you talking to your chat?
Maybe we just hit on the Twitter files. I don't remember. Anyways, it doesn't matter. So anyways, no, this is a live conversation. Just in order to have audio, I have to have two windows open, one of me on the side, one right here. But Pisco and I are talking right now.
Yes.
So anyways, so as an example, okay, there's a confluence of things that make me frustrated and pissed off. When you're talking about like the left going too far, quote unquote, I think the prime example is like the Kyle Rittenhouse story. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why is because should a 17-year-old be armed with a fucking AR-15 defending property in a state that he doesn't technically live in? Probably not. That I would view that as governmental failure. However, once he does so, and he's defending a community that he's a part of, because Kenosha, Wisconsin, and wherever the fuck he was from was 20 minutes. He worked in Kenosha. He had family in Kenosha, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, there, yep.
And then once, and then he didn't own the gun. It was given to him by his friend who lived in the state who owned it or some shit. I forget the exact details. But the point is, like, should that guy be characterized within pop media, liberal media, and progressive media for the better part of a year and a half as a white nationalist mass shooter who killed 3 or 4 black people? Absolutely fucking not. And so that's where I feel like the liberals or progressives were taking their dominance on social media and they were running away with it, even though the truth of the matter was infinitely more nuanced. Now, truth won out. Rittenhouse won out through the case. So ultimately, all's well that ends well. But I think that's kind of like probably the most egregious example of what I can think of where there was a truth of the matter, liberals and progressives didn't care, and they jammed through a narrative anyways.
Yeah, so I view the kind of narrativizing of the kind of propaganda stuff and a lot of the wild takes as kind of in the domain of discourse, that having free speech, an incident of free speech, is you're going to have people who are going to be hysterical, who are going to distort, who are going to misinform. That's kind of the cost of doing business. In terms of the Rittenhouse, I think that's a great example of where there was a robust discussion on his guilt or innocence, where the issues related to him culturally, legally, self-defense wise, they were all aired out, right? No one was being silenced for supporting Rittenhouse. No one was being silenced for not supporting Rittenhouse. And I think.
Yeah, and sorry, I have a right-wing guy who's bringing up something that I also think is kind of like a national level story where right-wingers were rubbed wrong. Nick Sandmann, the guy who was in the Indian guy's face in DC, and he was like had a smug face, but he was like a high school kid, the Covington kids, right? And so
this is all examples of media shit where they run with narratives, they distort. I mean, this is the media. I think that oftentimes they don't do their homework. And I think that that's true of both sides. And it's not a censorship issue. It doesn't really feel like a censorship issue. It doesn't feel like a government authoritarianism issue. It feels like
I
something
agree
we're
with
gonna
you.
have to deal with.
It feels like, if I'm being descriptively accurate, because it wasn't a government censorship issue. As far as I know, Joe Biden or whatever Democrats were in power, they weren't like, hey, Kyle Rittenhouse must be impaled at the stake. The worst thing that Biden did, though, is like tweet out a video. But I don't even know if Biden did that himself. That could have been just some random staffer who didn't fucking know the details of the Rittenhouse case. And then same thing with like the Covington kids. You're right. It ultimately was a national story that kind of broke the way, where truth ultimately won out, which is why free speech is so fucking important, is because, yes, you can have like people running with media narratives, but ultimately it tends to be that truth wins out over time. So yeah, I'll agree with you that what's going on right now is substantively worse. And then not just that, I would like to get into specifics on the Twitter files, because I don't think you're going to be surprised, but I think you'll be able to see more of where I am.
Okay, so before we get there, I just want to I think there's a lot of agreement here. I think there's an agreement that the media often distorts, or there'll be an emphasis, or there'll be a narrative that is on social media, or even sometimes on I think the reporting on that individual, that kid that you mentioned, that there was some bad reporting coming out of some mainstream news organizations. I think they even apologized, or that there was lawsuits even about that. So not much disagreement there. I think it's kind of par for the course so far as American history is concerned. We've had yellow journalism, where all the journalism that pushed for war in the lead up to the Iraq War, et cetera, et cetera. So there are always questions about responsibility and ethics in journalism. There are some journalists who do it better than others. I always feel uncomfortable saying the media as one entity, but you're going to find agreement with there that there's a bunch of idiots who are journalists, and smart people who are journalists, and dumb narratives and smart narratives. And
well, and sensationalism leads, right? Isn't a white nationalist mass shooter disrupting a Black Lives Matter protest by like killing 2 people and injuring a third? Isn't that infinitely more interesting than 18-year-old white kid defends himself during riot? And then same thing with the Covington kids. Isn't it 20 Catholic private school kids bully Native American in nation's capital? Isn't that way more interesting than schizo Native American was doing a protest at the same time that Catholic kids were hanging out in DC, and they got in each other's face a little bit? So like there's an element.
Absolutely.
There's an element of people, if it bleeds, it leads. And if it's sensational, then it's going to lead. And sometimes people lean into that shit.
I just don't view conservatives as victims of this. They're agents here, and sometimes their own.
Well, I would agree, particularly since Elon bought Twitter. I agree with you 100%.
But even before then, one, they're playing the game on the other side with respect to their. I mean, just open the New York Post. You would think after reading it that New York City is a fucking war zone, because every other story is
JD Vance tweeting or retweeting Donald Trump calling Portland a war zone deserving of federal troop intervention is one of the most fucking disgusting things that I've ever seen a Republican do ever.
But what I mean to say is, like, they play on sensationalism. They play on these identity issues, black versus
the Haitian
white,
migrants eating fucking cats and dogs.
Right.
Any moral authority that the right wing had in 2019 is fucking evaporated, and then some.
Sure. And the left does it too.
Well, and what Tagrin wants me to articulate, though, which I agree with, though, for $5 says, these are examples of left-wing media targeting regular people before the power shifted. This is your team's overreach, Pisco. However, I think that the binary team line is bad, because that basically means that I'm responsible for the Charlottesville truck attack. That means that I'm responsible for the Dylan Roof, the church shooting. That that's all part of my team. That's all the right-wing binary, right? So I don't think I should be holding Pisco responsible for everything that happens, quote unquote, on the left.
And you really shouldn't, because my Rittenhouse takes, I think, were quite qualified and quite tailored at the time. And I think some of them are probably still available. Some of the first conversations I was having on the matter had to do with like the law of self-defense and what would, whether this was an easy case. And I basically said it was not at all like a super clear-cut case that he's a murderer, pushing back on the notion that, there might be evidence that he provoked, but if there's not, doesn't look like it's going to be a good case for the prosecution. And so I wasn't playing into this racial narrative. I was against a lot of the certainly all of the rioting, all the violence and shit. That's not, anyone who knows me knows that that's not my bag, baby. So yeah, no, I get it. I don't like to ascribe collective guilt to any particular person. I don't know that he's doing that to me. I think we're just characterizing that the media will run with narratives. Both sides will play into those narratives and push different lines that attract clicks, attention,
Well,
and
that's
further their
where
goals.
okay, so that's where, regardless of the truth, okay, I just want to describe perception. I think that in 19 and 20, I felt this way as well. I know I felt this way 15 to 19. So what it felt like was the one conservative major media outlet in legacy media, I suppose, was Fox News, right? That was like the one major media outlet. Then, oh, thank you, baby. Oh, thank you. So now you could bring up other media outlets, but I'm just saying perception.
I
Let's
would,
roll with
but yeah.
perception. So with perception, Fox News is corporate. They're interested in tax cuts. They would be considered by many on the right to be like part of the uniparty or the deep state apologia, right? And so what happened is a lot of right wingers who didn't fit into the Fox News mold, they went to YouTube in order to have like a social media outlet. Now, what ended up happening, though, was because of COVID misinformation, because of election misinformation, because of not being able to use racial, ethno-religious, and sexual slurs, not being able to engage in hate speech. A lot of people, and by the way, like hate speech, I'm not saying illegal. I'm just saying like I dislike this person because of their immutable characteristic.
Under their codes of conduct, under their various different TOS.
You couldn't do that on social media. You couldn't do that on Twitter. You couldn't do that on YouTube, and those were the two biggest platforms at the time. And so that pressure, justified or not, led to right wingers feeling like an ideologically oppressed member within their own country, which is why I feel like Elon Musk purchasing Twitter has felt like this massive pressure release valve that has shown all of the horrors of the right wing.
I mean, I'm not even that convinced though that it's a pressure, because a pressure release valve implies it's letting off steam and is de-radicalizing or assuaging some of the concerns.
Yeah, now it's making it worse.
Yeah, no, I'm not convinced of that. In general, by the way, I think that I said both sides there just to indicate that both sides have some tactics, but in terms of degrees, I just don't view the right wing as this cringing minority in that era. We're talking about an era in which Trump was the president of the United States, and where for a lot of it, they had congressional control.
He was being attacked by the deep state, Pisco.
Yeah, no, but that's what I mean. All of these issues, to the extent that they're issues of culture, they're issues related to the media, and potential bias of social media corporations or whatever. But that's all in the realm of legitimate decisions about speech that are either done by individuals, corporations, or these like news entities. And I just don't see that as a government oppression issue, even at the level of like banning COVID misinformation, banning election misinformation, that kind of stuff. It seems like well within the rights of these social media platforms, their First Amendment rights, to decide and have their own discretion about what content they have.
The problem, though, is that I think that, because I was around for the debates at the time, especially 19 and 20, that's kind of when I got started, was the right wing and even the moderate right, which I would consider myself a part of, especially at the time, was saying like, hey, regardless of whether or not you think these things are legally justifiable, on principle, we're having problems where the right wing feels like they can't articulate their ideas for fear of like censorship or whatever, social media censorship. And what the common response at the time was, well, they're a private company, they can do what they want, which descriptively is true, but it's also not dealing with the problem. And now we actually have, the right wing has solved this problem through the market. Now you have Kick. Twitch is effectively like still its little fiefdom of like progressive and liberal and lefty bullshit, but Kick is now a viable streaming platform. Rumble is a viable video platform. What else is it? True Social. I've never been on it. I'm assuming it's a fucking nightmare, but True Social is an alternative to Twitter. And so as a result, the market has given us a solution. But what's happening is now we have split realities where the social media platforms that I would say probably had like a liberal bias, maybe a progressive bias, Now the right wingers are totally they either dominate these platforms now because the liberal and progressive social media biased platforms allowed the right wingers to come back once they loosened terms of service, or they're in their own schizo fantasy land. And the schizo fantasy land, like you said, it's like it's making them fucking worse, not better.
Yeah, so I want to comment on that because I just don't buy the narrative that these conservatives were all subject to this authoritarian nanny state slash regime of censorship that really stifled them in many ways. They were being catered to with the largest news organization in the country, that's Fox News, and the related News Corp properties. They have, you know, big ownership interests in various different media organizations, and now it's
like
even
Sinclair.
Yeah, exactly. And where they're cornering the market in talk radio, cornering the market in terms of these like distributors and stuff like that. Definitely a lot like we said, the big social media push for these alternative news and podcasters, that was all happening at the same time. You have people like Tim Pool and Steven Crowder rising up, et cetera, et cetera. So like these are all big avenues of media inclusion where these narratives are being played. They're not being silenced, and certainly not by the government. And now,
but they would argue that's in spite of progressive and liberal effort, not because of progressive and liberal tolerance.
But their best examples are COVID misinformation and election misinformation on like Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter to some extent, but barely even on Twitter. But like most of these narratives are still getting through, and yeah, I mean they were within their rights to do so, and it doesn't mean that they weren't getting the opportunity to voice their different concerns. And the proof of that, by the way, the proof of that is so many people bought into these COVID narratives. So many people still now are pushing bullshit stories about treatments for COVID, that COVID was all engineered, et cetera, things that have no basis in fact whatsoever. And so it's not the case that these views weren't articulated. Yeah, there were concerted efforts by some people to moderate that shit on certain platforms, but now look at where we are. In terms of every major social media corporation, you have Zuckerberg bent the knee to Trump. You have, so that's Facebook, Instagram, et cetera. You have YouTube and Google now bending the knee to MAGA narratives in some ways, and because they're fearful probably of regulation related to monopolization, some of these determinations, and they're trying to have a good friend in Trump. You have TikTok. They're leveraging now a new buyout, and they're going to have a deal that's going to be given to like News Corp and other allies of Trump. All the major news organizations are being pushed around. Bezos, right? Bezos, who owns the Washington.
Dude, I'll concede to all of this. I'll concede to all of this descriptively. However, I think that, I mean, I'm seeing it in chat a little bit, and I agree with it, is that this is in spite of liberal and progressive efforts, not because of some like principled commitment to free speech. And I'll just say, in Twitch and YouTube politics, whenever I brought this up, where I was like, hey, like, as a matter of fact, Key Code, a regular member, he articulated it perfectly, the exact sentiment at the time. Oh no, you can't be racist or misogynist while also spreading bullshit propaganda about it. Poor Republican, sad face. But dude, we got the world's smallest violin like played to us repeatedly on fucking panels where they're like, oh, you can't be racist. Oh, you can't be misogynist. Oh, you can't be a fascist. Oh, go fuck yourself, right? And they were playing the world's smallest violin. But you have to understand that there's no legal prohibitions against being racist. Against being sexist,
I
against being
that,
fascist, but that's the way that it fucking felt at the time.
These conservatives feel like they had to go to some off Broadway like social media organization, but they didn't. Most of their shit was freely being shared on Facebook
because monetization was not where it is now. And by the way, monetization on Rumble, Kick, and Twitter are good-ish now, but they're still not anything compared to YouTube. YouTube is still has the corner on monetization.
So now, as part of the analysis regarding the cultural zeitgeist vis-a-vis censorship, has to do with the monetization availabilities on these platforms. Like that can't be part of the analysis. I thought the problem was these views aren't being allowed, not that these views aren't being made profitable. And if that's the case, then
But
everyone
off
should be
of
talking shit about Destiny
popularity,
demonetization, but they don't give a
they
fuck.
would be profitable. The only reason why they weren't profitable is because social media companies decided that they were going to be moral arbiters of American speech.
Which they are all the time, which they are as a matter of course,
Sure.
which they are on, and everyone wouldn't have a problem with that. Like people were doing this big thing on Twitch to get certain content creators demonetized, but also the booby streamers to get the booby streamers because they didn't want ads being like sort of funneled to kids and have this kind of stuff on Twitch. And most of that stuff would not even be considered pornography, let alone obscenity or something. It just, maybe lascivious content or something. But yeah, I mean, that's speech. It's clearly protected speech.
No,
No one seems to have a problem with that.
I'm with you, and this is private. I guess what I'm trying to point at, regardless of whether or not I'm doing a good job, is that vibe, I guess, or whatever, of, oh, I can't say what I want to say, I can't do what I want to do, oh, if they weren't suppressing me, then I would still be making shitloads of cash, but they took me down because I was speaking truth to power about COVID or the election or how Donald Trump's amazing or about how black people are responsible for disproportionate levels of crime or about how trans people are all psychopathic and there's only two genders. All of that sense of
that
victimhood.
Vibe, yeah. I think it was an inauthentically crafted narrative.
I think a lot of these people are so stupid they genuinely believe their own bullshit.
Well, it's hard for me to take it seriously.
I think Tim Pool believes his own bullshit, by the way.
Have you seen that he might believe it, I don't know. Have you seen that SNL clip with Lisa Kudrow where she's like, I'm being censored and I'm only allowed on these platforms on Alex Jones, and like, so
yeah.
It's a meme, right? It's a meme. All these people.
No, that's it. Alex Jones was banned. Yeah, Alex Jones was banned for his fucking Parkland shooting schizo shit that he ended up losing tens of millions of dollars.
No, that's not Parkland. That's Sandy Hook. That's Sandy Hook. And
yeah, sorry.
That's defamation. That's defamation because he was accusing parents of being actors and lying about their kids being slaughtered. It was one of the most disgraceful, and they paint it as this was silencing of Alex Jones because Alex Jones was basically accusing these parents of doing the worst thing you could ever accuse a parent of doing, which is either orchestrating their child's killing or lying about their child having been murdered and being operators for the government and essentially sending people to harass these parents. It's
which is by the way, that's why I don't give a fuck. That's why I don't give a fuck, is because he effectively he was so egregious in his speech that I think that he would be a liability to any platform that carried him and propagated it. And then he was ultimately convicted. Now he has a right to express his earnestly held views out loud. But he also, I agree with you descriptively that social media platforms as carriers of content, they do have a moral responsibility to make judgments about what they're going to carry. And they're not just balancing the needs of the content creators, they're also balancing the needs of their advertisers and investors.
But I just view that as all right, yeah, Alex Jones was sued because he defamed a bunch of Sandy Hook parents. Alex Jones put CSAM, or allegedly, there was CSAM materials in the discovery materials they sent over to the other side. Alex Jones wouldn't even respond and was trying to evade service and wasn't even responding to the allegations at a certain point. He was engaged in some of the most reprehensible litigation tactics ever. If you watch,
I agree with you descriptively. Yeah.
I mean, this guy is a total scumbag. And again, when has he stopped talking? He has been a loud figure on the right, and he has not been shut up this entire time.
No, I agree. And so that's where, if we're in the space that we're in, which, by the way, I think that legalistically we're, the right sense of oppression, you think might have been manufactured or emphasized for political expedience. And then now we're in a completely different world where Twitch is not the only game in town. YouTube's not the only game in town. Twitter's not the only game in town. And so effectively the conservatives have followed through on the left-wing sentiment at the time, which was, if you don't like what we have, go fucking someplace else. And the conservatives went someplace else.
You mentioned that. Now the conservatives are implementing the thing that they accuse the left of doing.
Oh, because yes, I want to talk about, before we do that, I want to talk about the Twitter files, and I want to talk about how bad what the right wing is doing is. But I desperately need to use the restroom. Can you entertain my audience for like 60 seconds?
Absolutely. I'll give them a little rundown on the Twitter file stuff.
Perfect. I'll be right back.
Cool. So the reason we're talking about this is because the Trump administration is using the powers of the government to pressure coerce private actors to censor speech. And this was always a theory of the right that, maybe there aren't speech codes as such that are being implemented by the Biden administration, but they're pressuring private organizations, and the government's not allowed to do through coercion what they're not allowed to do like directly. Like they can't indirectly censor speech through some kind of bad faith coercion. And so the best example of that recently was the threat by the FCC chairman Carr against ABC and affiliates if they didn't take Jimmy Kimmel off the air. So that is the most clear-cut example of a coercive threat, basically a threat of government regulation, fines, etc., by the FCC if someone is not brought down in response to their views, basically for what they say and what their position is on different subjects. And in this case, it was what Jimmy Kimmel had to say about the reaction to MAGA, to Kirk's assassination, Charlie Kirk's assassination, in which he told the truth. He said a true statement, which was that MAGA was desperately trying to paint the shooter as someone other than themselves. That is a true statement. Is there potentially an implied implication or like a subtle implication that he thinks it's probable or possible that this person is MAGA? Maybe, but it's not 100% clear, I think, and emphatic. And I think it's a true statement. I think people took it out of context. And anyway, that brings us back to the Twitter files. The response to us being like, hey, this is a coercive threat. It's not allowed by Supreme Court precedent. It's certainly a violation of the First Amendment for the government to use its regulatory authority to go after private actors to censor speech. The response has been, but what about the Twitter files, bro? And I think that there is a willingness by some people in the middle to concede that point. So yes, well, I criticize it when all sides do it. And that I think is giving way too much fucking ground. And I am eager to seek out these centrists to make sure that whenever they're trying to give ground and say, well, I criticize both sides on this specific issue, there's someone pushing back. And so that's what I guess is
let's do it. What I think is super interesting is I can articulate my my passion about the Twitter files and the implications that I made at the time and the arguments that I made at the time. But over the past year or two, I hope she doesn't mind me saying this, I would say I actually became friends with one of the people who's at the heart of the Twitter files. And I kind of got like an inside scoop on it. So to articulate the problem, or at least what I view as the problem, is that we did have the election misinformation motivation and the COVID misinformation motivation for why we were doing what we were doing in 21 and 22, right?
Being Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube to some extent.
Yeah, if people are getting bad information about COVID, if they're getting bad information about vaccines, if they're getting bad information about treatment programs, then there's a chance that literally tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people who do not need to die could either be severely injured or dead. And so
people
therefore,
downplay that risk. People downplay that risk.
They really do, but we lost 1.1 million people.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought it up. Someone who's I think puts this well is Sam Harris. Listen, I always have a soft spot in my heart for Sam Harris, even though I disagree with him on a lot of stuff. He put it like, and he was quoting some citation somewhere, but basically suggesting that if there had been better uptake in the vaccine comparable to the people who were dissuaded to take the vaccine when they could have by misinformation, whatever, it could save on the order of magnitude of like 100,000 lives or more in the United States alone, and probably millions across the world. So this is not a trivial amount of lives. I mean, think about all we're doing now in response to Charlie Kirk's assassination.
Right.
You have 100,000 potential people who could have lived. This is not a trivial issue.
I try to explain this as a matter of scale, and a lot of people really don't like it. 9/11, 2001, we lost 3,000 people, and we launched a multi-trillion-dollar international war that resulted in hundreds of thousands of deaths. But for 1.1 million people, we act like it's water off of a duck's ass. and that's I don't think people understand the scale. I think they just hear 1 million and they just hear a 3,000 and they just go, it's a lot.
Yeah, no, and I think all of us behave this way, that we don't react. And I don't know if this is a moral failing or what it is. But so, for example, if I told you that 10,000 people will die if you take a given policy, and I'm like, oh, wait, no, I was wrong. It's 60,000. Your being against that policy isn't going to be 6x. It's not going to be perfectly mapped on. Sorry, you're muted. I don't know if you're muted. Yeah, but you whatever your valuing of that issue, of that policy, and how much you value the cost isn't going to be perfectly represented by the degree and difference in lives at that scale. And there's something about the scale of these things that really turns off our intuitions. And sometimes I think that needs to be like recalibrated, because we, like you mentioned, the 3,000 number is like much easier to comprehend for some reason, and counterintuitively it leads to us doing more action.
Yeah, it's more personal. It's the same thing with Irina Zarutska. Like I guarantee you, within like the past like 2 or 3 weeks, there's been like random homeless schizophrenic people who have killed someone, you know, randomly. But because we don't have video of it, because they're not a war refugee, because they're not like a vulnerable, beautiful white person, we haven't heard any of their names. But statistically, we are a country of 300 million people, and crazy shit happens all the fucking time. So it's hard to remove the personal from the statistical or vice versa. But the but I would like to walk through the Twitter files for the Steelman, and then I would like to rip apart my own Steelman. So if you'll indulge me, I'll try to be as brief as I can. So the Twitter files from my perspective is that we had these things that are in the public interest, like COVID misinformation, like election misinformation. And then we had actors who seem to have a parallel interest. For instance, I think it's like the Everest Institute or the Alpine Institute. I forget who it was, but it was 2 years before the was this had to have been the 2020 election, I want to say. But anyways, what was it had to have been the 2020 election. But they ran a misinformation scenario that was specifically about Hunter Biden. Now, that's weird to me, because like, why are you creating like an emergency scenario specifically about misinformation related to Hunter Biden? But if you talk to, well, I was going to say, if you talk to people who ran the exercise, the reason why they say is because not only did they have misinformation operations specifically from Russia in 2016, but Burisma was hacked, and it was known that they were hacked before the election. So they just put two and two together, and they were just like, oh, this is the most likely thing that's going to happen. So we're going to run a realistic scenario. Sorry, go ahead.
It's not just that. No, you're absolutely correct about all that. But remember, this Burisma narrative that occurred, I'm echoing, sorry, that occurred largely as a response to the first impeachment. That's when it really picked up steam, this narrative, in 2019. So that's number one. So everything you just said, plus the Burisma narrative blowing up in 2019, and that's in response to the impeachment stuff. And at the same exact time, the FBI is getting fake information from Alexander Smirnov, who later was charged with being a Russian agent, and falsely giving this FD 1023 or whatever to the FBI, saying that the Bidens were taking money from Mykolaiv Zlochevsky of Burisma. And the DOJ knew that that's the Russian agent implanting this fake story to the FBI at a time when everyone is spreading all of this fake information about Burisma and the Bidens, and that Biden was taking bribes. And so in the context of that, where the FBI is actively assessing that someone is a Russian agent and sending in misinformation that is being sourced to known Russian like these Russian oligarchs and Russian affiliated influencers and people like that, it is not at all surprising why the scenario they were running had to do with Hunter and Burisma, because that's what we knew that they were working on, and that's what Trump was playing into after the first impeachment.
Well, and the another interesting detail about that though is, bear in mind, take everything I say with a grain of salt. I'm just an asshole with a webcam. But they actually asked the people who ran the exercise, like, why did you do this? And they cited Russian involvement. They cited the Burisma hacks. They cited, this, that, the other. And then also what they were saying is, I don't know if they were aware of the FBI laptop story. I don't think they were at the time. But effectively, what they said is they had been studying Russian disinformation campaigns for so long that they knew that Russian disinformation campaigns oftentimes involve a kernel of truth. And so they will operate based off of several verifiable facts, but then they will coat in all this extra bullshit that's not verifiable. Therefore, the poison goes down with like a little bit of sugar. And so that's why they suspected that what was going to happen was there could be genuine critique of Hunter Biden, of Joe Biden, of the State Department, of Ukraine. But what was going to happen was the Russians, in their opinion, was going to coat the verifiable information in bullshit. And then it would be so confusing leading up to the election that's how they were planning on manipulating the election, was because nobody was going to have time to research and verify the information by the time that the election was available, or by the time people were voting.
So to take a step back, the reason why people point to this, what Connor is describing is in the lead up to the 2016 election season, there were a bunch of FBI communications with various social media companies where they were giving warnings about potential Russian misinformation / tests / like little war game stuff that they were doing. The details of which are beyond the scope of this conversation. But needless to say, they were in some ways indicating that Russian misinformation, that they were planning to interfere in the 2020 election, and that these maybe are things you should look out for. And because there is no direct evidence that any of the specific acts of censorship that are what are complained about, the one most prominently is the New York Post story about the Hunter Biden laptop, where there's no direct evidence that the government officials directed or even requested for that information to come down on Facebook, on Twitter, anywhere. In fact, in the Twitter files itself, you had Matt Taibbi say that was the problem. The problem, according to Matt Taibbi, was that the FBI didn't comment publicly on a news story relating to the Hunter Biden laptop. So there's no direct evidence that they're involved in the censorship of those stories on the various platforms. The response from MAGA has been, oh, well, look at what the FBI did. They coached prior to this coming out, as though they could have anticipated that Rudy Giuliani would release this, and this blind laptop Isaacson guy would give the laptop to like they planned this whole fucking shit out. It's preposterous that they knew this was going to drop in October, and so months before, they were wargaming and giving these vague kind of notions about what would come out. The MAGA propagandists, they say they were coached. FBI, DOJ, they were coaching Twitter, they were coaching Facebook, and that's how they were pressuring them. But there's just no evidence that there's good reasons why these war games, these threat assessments related to the Bidens and Burisma is because there was ongoing Russian disinformation campaigns, including to the FBI, regarding this story. So there's no reason to think that that's coercion at all.
Which kind of brings up the next point, but I want to address something that Bo Dickerson, a contrarian right-winger in my chat, said. So we were We were over-prepared for Russian disinfo. That's why we killed a story about a laptop the FBI had in its possession for over a year. Laugh my ass off with gymnastics. But Bo, here's my problem with what you just said, okay? Two things can be happening simultaneously. As a matter of fact, a dozen things can be happening simultaneously. The FBI can be earnestly attempting to counter foreign disinformation campaigns or misinformation campaigns within the election sphere. There can also, Pisco's probably not going to like this, but they can also be sitting on the the Biden laptop story or whatever the fuck. And then I know you wouldn't like that, but that's fine. And then simultaneous to that, hold on, killed a story about a laptop the FBI had in its possession for over a year, laughed my ass off gymnastics. Oh, and then also there can be those things should be investigated separately because now the story is messy to me. And what I mean by that is the FD 1023 created by this Russian misinfo agent or whatever, that should be going to an FBI agent and a state attorney. And they should be verifying whether or not this guy's lying, he's a Russian asset, he's doing this, he's doing that. But honestly, I think that, you should be able to write subpoenas and say, we have all of this information related to alleged financial impropriety, as accusing Joe Biden and Hunter Biden of this alleged financial impropriety. In order to corroborate this information, we need to research it. And then you start doing like a financial forensics in order to see if there's anything relevant to the allegation. And so that's where, for me, I think you're kind of muddying the waters a little bit.
Here's the problem. Like, there just is a good reason for the FBI, as Connor alluded to be doing these kinds of warnings to social media organizations, because the Russians were actively trying to launder this story about Burisma, this fake story about bribery to Burisma, the fake one, right? That they had Alexander Smirnov trying to sell and to the FBI agents. So there was all the reason in the world for the intelligence agencies to be concerned about Russian interference through fake stories, especially given their interference campaign in 2016. This makes all the sense in the world. And oftentimes the critique is, well, the FBI, I heard this from your chat or whatever, was sitting on the Burisma laptop story. The FBI, and we know this from the IRS, they were investigating Hunter Biden for crimes. This investigation started in 2018, 2019, arguably even in 2016, when Barack Obama's DOJ then started opening investigation into Mykolaiv Zlochevsky. This is in the aftermath of what was going on with Ukraine and the Joe Biden statement. The Obama DOJ actually opened up an investigation into Zlochevsky, which obviously would touch on Hunter Biden to the extent that he was involved in any stuff. So the DOJ was not sitting. They just weren't like fucking Kash Patel every day tweeting from his toilet in a New York restaurant about lies and about the status of investigations, where the typical practice of the DOJ and the FBI has been let their investigative moves and their filings do the speaking. They don't just publicly comment on the stories.
Yeah,
and
I don't want to necessarily get lost in here, because I think there's a narrative thread that you and I can follow that we will agree on. Whereas if we get into some details, we're going to start quibbling over bullshit. But Mad Money Max, I think, actually summarizes my perspective. And again, you don't have to agree with it. Burisma is fake, and what I mean by that is, Hunter Biden, if he had just done, maybe, because I don't even think he's been investigated for FARA, if he had done maybe some FARA disclosures.
No, he was definitely investigated for FARA. But go ahead.
Well, not charged. Okay. And again, let's not get lost on the details, because I think there's a narrative thread that you and I can agree on. So let's say that Hunter Biden had followed FARA to the letter, and that he had declared his taxes to the letter. He probably would not be He probably would not have been charged with any crimes.
Yeah, no, there would be no crime there. I don't think he did.
So if he complied with FARA and did his taxes appropriately, he could have done what he was doing legally and avoid all government censure.
And this is us not even getting into the gross, insane, makes you want to throw up double standard here about self-enrichment, given all the shit that's happening
Jared
right now.
Kushner and the current Trump admin.
Kushner just announced a deal with EA. They're buying EA based on this Saudi investment.
No. Hold on. Tagarun, you take it too far. Sorry.
Yeah.
Connor went in on the Hunter Biden cock gazing. It's a shame. No. Fuck you. I'm still a Hunter Biden critic. I still stand by probably 95% of the criticisms that I had for Democrat sweeping. I stand by 95% of this. I'm trying to make descriptive concessions to reality. So yeah.
It is reality, and there's no way to get around it. And to think that, like,
no, I will not be voting for Hunter Biden in 2028.
No, yeah,
sorry.
Me neither. But this whole notion, because it's going around that the DOJ or the IRS, they were sitting on Hunter Biden shit, and that's not true. And it's also not possible, right, for the FBI to verify and the integrity of what Rudy Giuliani was selling to the New York Post, because in the possession of the FBI was a laptop. Okay, Hunter Biden allegedly gave a laptop to this laptop repair guy, a Mac. That guy takes a disk image or a couple disk images of the laptop, gives the laptop to the FBI. That's what's in the possession of the FBI. And then this laptop guy, it's a crazy story, calls Rudy Giuliani and gives a disk image, a hard drive, to Rudy Giuliani. Obviously, the FBI is not in possession of that hard drive. The FBI can't chapter and verse like authenticate, nor is it appropriate for the FBI, when it's conducting an ongoing criminal investigation. It doesn't want to jeopardize its potential case against Hunter Biden. It doesn't want to claim that it can authenticate what's on that hard drive, because it doesn't have it in its possession. it never had chain of custody. It doesn't know if shit was added to it after the fact. And so, of course, the FBI can't publicly comment, which is seemingly what Matt Taibbi and some of your idiot conservative reply guys want, like the FBI to authenticate a device that they've never seen and has never been in their possession at a time when they are actively investigating Hunter Biden. And so it's not just wrong what this guy is saying, what the MAGA propagandists are saying. It's the opposite of true, right? Everything that they're saying the FBI is doing and should do is the opposite. Is what they shouldn't be doing, or / what they are already doing. That is, they're not sitting on that information, and they shouldn't be talking.
This is where we're going to get lost in the weeds, because then I'm going to, Bud123 is going to say, no, they had the physical laptop and the physical hard drive. And dude, I want to talk about the narrative thread. Okay. So moving back to the narrative thread.
Yep.
So my beef at the time, which I'm sure that if you watch the content that we made at the time, was that effectively I found it to be, not only did I find Hunter Biden's behavior unethical and arguably immoral, illegal, but I also found...
Can I just grant something right there? Because I do think it was unethical for Hunter Biden to take that job with Burisma, given his father's role in the Ukraine negotiation. So I'm not saying that it was a good thing to do. I'm just saying the narrative surrounding it, that Joe Biden has done something illegal or corrupt, that hasn't been shown. And if the FBI and DOJ are doing something corrupt in that context, other than potentially Bill Barr funneling Rudy Giuliani conspiracy theories, that might be corrupt and was never truly investigated, as far as we know, with an IG report. But that's what I'm fighting at. I do agree that Hunter Biden did something unethical by pursuing this board of directors position.
So we could get bogged down in legal versus ethical and moral and all that bullshit. So that's my opinion. Pisco doesn't have to co-sign with everything I say, right? Then my anxiety or anger or fear was that Jim Baker used to be the head counsel of the FBI, and he was in the upper echelons of the FBI. And so I think he was also either a consultant or some shit. I fucking forget. It's been a few years on Crossfire of Hurricane and all this kind of stuff. And so I think in an ideal world, the chief counsel of a social media company that's receiving consultative information from the federal government, it should have an adversarial relationship. That would be my ideal, is that you shouldn't, this is an ideal, not a law, but you should have a lawyer who fucking hates the FBI, who loves telling the FBI to go fuck itself, who's a fucking high-end defense attorney or some shit.
But here's the problem. They were doing that, right? They were doing that.
That's what we were going to get to on the detail parts.
Yeah.
So Jim Baker becomes head counsel of the FBI, and for me, it's uncomfortable to have the chief federal law enforcement agency of the country in weekly consultative meetings with Jim Baker, and then simultaneous to that, this is where my friend comes in. I hope she doesn't mind me shouting her out. Renee DiResta, who's a brilliant Californian Republican, totally heterodox, interesting girl, and she worked, I believe, for Stanford. Okay, so she was working for Stanford University, and she was granted funding researching like cults and misinformation and disinformation campaigns. And she was a part of an NGO that received federal dollars in order to do this research. And so she was a part of, and criticized by Tim Pool, criticized by Trump, criticized by Elon Musk for effectively being the militant part of the NGO industrial complex, hunting down and destroying America's free speech by finding terms of service violations and turning it over to the Twitter to take action. And Twitter was currently under the manipulative thumb of Jim Baker and the FBI. Well, to hear Renee characterize it is that she's actually fought Democrats a substantive amount of her life. She is a free speech person. Her shit was primarily research. And if she had to put a quantitative amount of how much was foreign disinformation campaigns, how much was child pornography, how much of it was criminal enterprise, and how much of it was COVID misinformation and election disinformation, I think the ratio that she put it at was 90% foreign psyops, like 1% child pornography, another 2 to 5% actual criminal organizations engaging in information warfare, and then between like 1 and 5% was COVID and election misinformation. And then out of all of her recommendations for people who had violated terms of service, the amount of accounts that were taken action against was like less than 10%. And so for her, she's being like characterized as this this Machiavellian anti-free speech witch who destroyed American freedom of conscience and speech on the internet. But she's saying that 99% of her work or 95% of her work wasn't even implemented.
And one, I'm thankful that you bring that up. You said her name is Renee DiResta. DiResta?
Yes, RENEEDRIESTA.
That's worth knowing, and it's just helping confirm what is obvious, right? They weren't these requests made by the government, or were they're basically saying we think this violates your TOS. They were routinely, in the majority of the time, not listened to. And so what is the evidence, in fact, that the government used its regulatory authority to coerce these social media companies into doing something they didn't want to do already, or that they were actually effective in doing so? Did that, the fact like that they threatened or were effective in manipulating or coercing the social media companies? To the contrary, the social media companies did not comply at various times. Sometimes they agreed that there were TOS violations, but that's no more or less than what like famous people could get out of Twitter, right? This is, hey, this is setting out my misinformation. You need to get this. Or like you said, obviously the government's going to want to get involved, and it relates to public health, or where it relates to
foreign misinformation campaigns,
or
foreign information warfare,
or CSAM, or anything like that, right? So all of that stuff, I think, is fair game for the government to just have a conversation with social media companies, as long as there's no coercive element to it, and there's no evidence there was. Now, what will happen is these social media companies will say things like pressure now when they're trying to appeal to Republicans in Congress and in the executive branch, but there's no evidence other than them asking, unless you're willing to say that any ask is by definition pressure. But that's, of course, not what our case law says about coercion. Coercion is something where you're using or threatening to use regulatory authority to go after people and get companies to do what they already don't want to do anyway. And in point in fact, these social media organizations, they claim that they wanted to have these standards by themselves. Even Google, in that statement that they put out about YouTube, which a lot of people are misconstruing, they don't say that people were banned because of the government. They say we resisted the government's requests to change our TOS. And basically we implemented the rules that we had, and we've been independent this entire time. And so people are taking the statement from Google and suggesting that individuals were banned because of actions by the government, when Google itself is saying that never happened. And so the narrative is falling apart on every level, and there's no example of actual government coercion of these social media companies. They failed at the Supreme Court, and they failed to point to any single one instance of government coercion by the Biden administration. Not to mention, the last thing I'll say, the most prominent example of censorship that they point to is the Hunter Biden laptop story, which came out in October 2020 when Trump was the president. So it's all bullshit. And the comparison to Twitter files is so vacuous as to be active deceit, in my opinion.
Well, then I want to articulate a disagreement that I hopefully think will make some of my chatters feel good. So, and this chat is relevant to it. So Twitter employed so many ex-FBI employees that they had their own private Slack channel on Twitter, lol. Okay. So hold on. They had their own Slack channel. That was something. But anyways, the point is though, that what I'm trying to articulate, which I think that you should appreciate, and it's true now. So I hope that you agree that it principally should be true. I'm not talking about legal. I'm kind of talking about moral, but I'm not talking about something that should be compelled, okay? I think that on principle, social media companies are so powerful that they should have a default adversarial relationship when it comes to free speech in the United States of America. And what I mean by that is that like they should borderline have like ACLU fucking lawyers as the people who are taking a look at free speech within the United States. Because what's happening now, I think that half of the arguments that you used for, oh, well, we didn't pressure, we just asked them politely. Well, the Trump admin, which by the way, I'm going to go ahead and agree is infinitely worse than what the Twitter files allege. That's what they're falling back to now that they didn't succeed. They say, oh, the FCC chair was just joking. He never actually filed anything. Oh, Trump tweeting this thing. Oh, Trump's just crazy. He just flies off the handle. There's no pressure. There's no regulatory pressure. But we all know that's bullshit, right?
Yeah, but because the evidence is right in front of us that this public call obviously is pressure. There's no sense in which he's joking about that. And Trump reaffirmed his endorsement of that action and basically repressuring ABC after ABC decides to bring Kimmel back. And so in no sense, like the thing is, those excuses fall by the wayside when the evidence is right in front of us. And it's not just this one instance or an isolated fact pattern. It's throughout the entire administration, universities, law firms, immigrants, states and cities. Any time where the federal government can wield its authority to punish people for not agreeing with administration, they have used it and they will continue to use it. And so even in isolation, the defenses don't work. But when you take the overall look at the pattern in practice and what FIRE, this First Amendment organization, who I think is out to sea on the Twitter files, if I'm being honest, I think FIRE's out to sea on the Twitter files. But even then, they're acknowledging that this administration is different in character and substance overall. And so you're not, and you can't give the benefit of the doubt to this administration when they're basically withholding funds from university because they don't agree with the administration. They're, revoking clearances of law firms, et cetera. So I've already said it, but like, yeah, that's basically it. That like the evidence is in front of us. It's right there. And all of the excuses at some point, like even Rob Noerr, even Gavin McInnes, they're like, yeah, we're hypocrites. Yeah. There's no way to square this. And there isn't a way to square this because the positions are fundamentally inconsistent.
Yeah, I want to say one more thing about Renee DiResta before we move on. So the conspiracy, whenever people talk to me about the 9/11 conspiracy theory or whatever, I'm like, dude, you obviously have never worked for the federal government because like we're so stupid and the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing and it's all over the place and all that kind of shit. So the fact that like 1,000 people would be needed to carry on the 9/11 conspiracy pretty much tells me that 9/11 was not a conspiracy, right? At least like America intentionally doing the terrorist attacks, right? And so but with Renee DiResta, she effectively told me the same thing when I was pressing her about it and asking her about it. She's like, so I was like, okay, well, did you ever, you're telling me that 90% of your shit was foreign intel ops, documenting them. And by the way, I think that reporting, like, let's say that you find a Russian bot farm or a Chinese bot farm, and they're all pushing Civil War propaganda. I think it's like borderline their Renee's civic duty to report that to Twitter to get banned. That way our foreign adversaries are not stoking the flames of civil war within the United States. So that's actually like based in my book, right? So 90% of what Renee was doing was based. CSAM, reporting child abusers, that's based. Reporting criminal stuff, that's based. So now we're down to the
what is not based? Yeah.
We're down to the 1 to 5%, which is COVID misinformation and election misinformation. But then we fall back to 90% of it was not acted upon. And so therefore, even if I find it cringe that we have an American making money to report on the terms of service violations of Americans, if it's less than 5% of her workload and 90% of it is not acted upon, I don't know if I should be losing sleep over that shit. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, sorry, go ahead. I've been yapping for a bit.
Especially when you don't have to go far to express those views. You don't have to go far to find.
Oh, sorry. Like final point. It was what I was building up to. She's never met Jim Baker. So it wasn't the FBI head counsel rubbing elbows with NGOs, rubbing elbows with the current FBI liaison in order to destroy free speech. It was the Twitter saying, we want an FBI guy because we want to have somebody who's capable of liaising with law enforcement. That's why we hired Jim Baker,
who's a talented general counsel. I mean, these government employees. Look right now. I think Lisa Monaco, she was deputy AG for Merrick Garland under Biden. I think she just took a position at Microsoft. It's because these government lawyers, these are prestigious jobs at very competitive government agencies.
And you did your public service, so now you want your 6 to 7 figure job, making fucking shitloads of cash for the private sector. And by the way, your connections in DC might be valuable. You might be able to call somebody You might be able to call something fucked up happens, and you might be able to call somebody.
But that means there's an assumption oftentimes that
I'm a mute. Sorry for the echo.
No worries. But the people will have regarding, well, he used to work for the FBI, therefore he's aligned with the FBI. That's not the case. These people, you have to prove it, because if it were enough to show, oh, you work for a 3-letter agency, now you're aligned with that agency and you're an effective government employee or something, then Jesus fuck. That is just an unworkable standard that you're going to say everyone who's in public employment at these agencies now, I guess, has to stay in public employment for the rest of their lives.
Well,
it's going to be a bit harder now that Trump is firing everybody. So, and doesn't
okay, want to retire. I'm with you to an extent, but I stand by my desire to inculcate a culture where social media has an adversarial relationship with the federal government. And what I mean by that is like ABC taking Jimmy Kimmel off the air because the FCC, because he said something spicy. The FCC chair made a joke about regulatory action.
Who says it was a joke? Does anyone say it was a joke?
Fox News pundits that made me want to kill myself earlier today. No fucking way. Yeah, dude. It might have been Scott Jennings. It might have been the other guy that we watched where I was being racist and I wasn't paying attention to white people's names and I called him Scott Jennings. But I said Fox News. It wasn't even a Fox News thing. It was the CNN panel with Adam Mockler. So if you go to the CNN panel with Adam Mockler,
oh shit, I'll take a look at that.
There's some Trump dick rider who's basically saying, "Oh, the president was just joking. Oh, the FCC chair was just going off on Twitter."
They're such scum. But I just want to, Richard, I know you're going to talk, but I just want to say, isn't the intuition, if you get an ex-FBI guy, that you're getting that guy not to more align yourself from the FBI, but to protect yourself from the FBI, right? Like if you're taking the most cynical view of Twitter, the fact that they would get an FBI alum, wouldn't that suggest that they're doing that to insulate themselves from FBI pressure and to better protect themselves from intrusion, or to have a better relationship?
I think it can be read both ways.
That's what I mean. Like, it's not enough to be read both ways. He worked for the FBI, you know. I mean, that's just. I think that's just a thought terminating concept.
Well, and I think it can be read both ways. So, for instance, like I agree in principle with what Kay just said, which is the issue is a person willing to be paid to try and suppress voices, forget its effectiveness or not. On principle, it's objectionable, and the censorship increases the distrust and leads to death. However, this is I agree with you on principle that we should be maximizing the freedom of conscience, freedom of speech of American citizens and allowing them to express themselves in earnestly held beliefs. However, I feel like we are in this weird place now where we are dealing, in my opinion, with bad actors or delusional actors. And I don't know what to do about that. I don't think the federal government should get involved. I think to some degree, maybe you could fence it in with terms of service. But there are people now that they're not interested in the liberal project. They're not interested in freedom of speech or freedom of conscience. They're not interested in the marketplace of ideas. What they're interested in is effectively like 3,000-year-old Greek arguments about sophists, where they think that they can use rhetoric to make reality. They can make reality by using rhetorical arguments. And that's what I feel about JD Vance, where he's saying, or Donald Trump says, war-torn Portland. And JD Vance, as a quote-unquote Republican, somebody who's supposed to care about the Republic, he's retweeting and endorsing the sentiment that Portland, Oregon is currently under siege. It's in war. And we need federal troops to be deployed to Portland to end the war-like violence caused by Democratic incompetence. And then you take a look at what people are posting on social media, and they're like, I'm in Portland. There's no fucking war. Here's the park. And then somebody's like, oh, yeah, well, I saw this, and I'm in Portland, too. And it's like half a dozen or a dozen homeless people sleeping on the fucking street. Excuse me. But deploying the fucking Marines to deal with homeless people is how we will kill this fucking republic.
And that's what the framers understood as well. I mean, I couldn't agree more with your point there about the military deployments. I think that's antithetical to
the normalization of this is. I think the Republic is strong enough to survive. The normalization of this kind of rhetoric and this line of thinking where you can create reality through rhetoric and you can create a war footing through lies should be alarming to any person of good conscience, especially Republicans.
to square the circle there, that's also what was at stake in the election misinformation policies. Now, do I agree with them? No, I don't. I am in favor of open discourse. In my inclination, if I were in charge, is to have more free speech in all these places. I'm not necessarily against the policy shifts that YouTube and Google are doing. I'm not against the, I don't want to see Destiny demonetized. In my perfect world, I'm not even sure that it makes sense to like ban Alex Jones from being on YouTube, that kind of stuff. So I very much am inclined towards free speech, et cetera, et cetera. But that was what was at stake with the election misinformation and COVID misinformation stuff. And it's within the realm of acceptable choices for these platforms legally to decide that they don't want to house that content. Just like they don't have a requirement to house any particular kind of bad content that they deem that they don't want to have.
Well, and imagine that you have a paternalistic perspective towards the citizens of the United States. I'm an asshole. Like I've said many times, I think democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the other ones. And that I genuinely view the average American with, I might love them on a fraternal level. If their tires burst, I'm going to help them change their tire on the side of the road. If they need $5 to eat a meal, I'm going to give them $5. But I view them with some level of derision and contempt, where I think they're fucking idiots who don't understand anything. And so if you have a paternalistic view of the American people and you're in government, meaning that you were chosen to wield power, and you know that you are balancing the right to freedom of expression and freedom of conscience versus the deaths of your citizens, you might take a paternalistic view and say, yeah, I believe in freedom of speech and freedom of conscience, but there's delusional, insane, and manipulative people who are taking advantage of a national healthcare crisis, and tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of lives are at stake. Therefore, I'm not going to compel social media companies via law to ban COVID misinformation, but I'm going to recommend it to them. And that you might view that as your earnestly held responsibility as the government.
And the government, to be clear, I don't even know if they're taking the position now that that they these social media companies should not be banning people calling other people fascists at this point, or calling themselves fascists. Like, this is, I think, beyond just the Twitter files shit that we've been talking about, the double standard hypocrisy shit. We might not even, or maybe it's not even a good day to get into it because it's so blatant, so horrible that at this point, it just shows you that they don't have any principles or values. They never cared about this shit. They never cared about either cancel culture or government censorship or government coercion at all. And I think by giving them ground on the Twitter files, Connor, I'm not saying that you're doing this a lot or you're doing it grossly. Haven't seen you being so blatantly, both sidesism on this. But I just don't think if you were ever to be asked about it, I wouldn't even give ground on it on all, because I don't think that the Twitter files is an example of government coercion. Maybe you can say that it's indicative that there was communication lines more than we thought between the government and social media companies. But I think people were naive for not thinking that the government was talking to these entities in the first place about all sorts of shit. And it doesn't show coercion in my mind.
There's an issue here, and maybe you think I'm giving it too much away, but just as an example, and sorry, I keep checking my chat, but I parasocially love my chat. By the way, Pisco's chat and my chat. Like the stream. It's free.
Yeah.
Share it with your friends. If you have a good time hanging out with Pisco, or if you have a good time hanging out with me, tell your friends about it.
Hell yeah.
Engage in chat. I have, maybe with the exception of Pisco's chat, I think I have one of the smartest, most interesting, most insightful, most cool chats in Twitch and YouTube politics. And I'm sure Pisco has a good community as well.
Oh, yeah. I love it.
And then super chats and memberships if you got them. If you're broke, you're barely paying bills, you're just surviving, don't worry about it. But if you got an extra 5 or 10 burning a hole in your pocket and you want to support Pisco or myself, then go ahead. We appreciate it. But anyways, okay. So Mad Money Max says, not let the delusional sort themselves out. Social Darwinism. That's my instinct. But I think that's easy to say when you're not working in first response or the hospital field. I think it's more difficult to say when you hear the testimony or talk to first responders and nurses who effectively said that there were vaccine skeptics and COVID skeptics who were flooding the ERs and dying from effectively asphyxiation because they were drowning within their own bodies. And they were in shock that they were going to die. Like they thought they just had like a bad flu. They thought they just had bad pneumonia. And they were saying like, hey, no, you have a serious infection. Your body is shutting down. And these people were saying like, oh, I'm 30, I'm 40, I'm 50, I'm 60, but I'm in good health. I don't need to call my family in order to say my final goodbyes. And the doctors and the nurses had to tell them like, no, your body's shutting down. You're going to be gone in the next 48 hours. And so, I mean, listen to a few of those stories and then tell me that like, we should just let people sort themselves out. Because I don't think out of the 1.1 million people, the COVID skeptic or the vaccine skeptical people, I think there's probably plenty of good people who got wiped out just because they had a bad opinion. And
we're living with the results
bad opinion shouldn't be a death sentence.
We're living with the results of this kind of credulism where the whole fucking autism announcement, did you see any of that with RFK and Trump talking about, hey, you should go get 5 or 6 different stops for your vaccines and don't take Tylenol, and we're going to cut all cancer research.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And we're going to, this shit is so stupid. And we're living with the results of these echo chambers and misinformation traps that have been created. So, would I ban all this speech on these platforms if I were in charge? No. But is it a super easy call given the nature of the health crisis and the way in which like our population is boomerfied, in the sense that they will believe anything they read on the internet? Like they'll believe anything. They'll read some shit on Facebook. I saw a meme going around of Simpsons called it that Charlie Kirk would be assassinated, and it's like an exact 1-to-1 replica of Charlie Kirk.
And it was an episode a decade ago where some character named Kirk or whatever was killed near the date of Charlie Kirk. But you know what's crazy? Sorry, this is kind of an aside. But Trump tweeted an AI video of himself advocating for medical policy that he himself never took part in. What level of fucking dementia is that? Dude.
Or the med base. Did you see the med base?
No, the med base. That's what I'm talking about, dude.
Yeah.
How can you be a Trumper of good conscience talking about the auto pen and talking about Biden dementia and talking about the cabinet, and then your dickhead of a fucking president tweeted out a fake AI video of himself instituting a medical policy that does not exist? What the fuck is that?
If I say that gullible is written on your ceiling, I bet you 50% of the audience will go up and look. It is insane. Like
it's bad. It's bad.
And in that context, I'm not going to take every maybe not perfectly tailored TOS style censorship regime to be the equivalent of government instituted speech codes and government coercion, which is what we're seeing right now.
Well, and I want to share this with you because you asked me like, oh, well, I think you're conceding too much on the Hunter files, okay, or the Twitter files. My problem is the way that I've approached content creation my entire career is right or wrong. I'm just saying the truth as I see it, in line with my training and experience and life experience as best as I can, and that's all I've ever been doing. And so when you and I were beefing about the Twitter files 2 or 3 years ago, even if I ended up being like descriptively wrong, I was still sharing like my very earnest understanding of the matter and my very serious concerns about like freedom of speech and the perversion of power and undue influence and all that kind of shit. And I think the problem with your advice, where you're like, okay, well, you're conceding too much to the side that's bad, is that I want to be able to hold them to the same level of criticism that I held you to. And just as an example, with this this terms of service thing, or excuse me, this AI video from Trump, I want to be able to say, no, Biden probably was some level of demented, and he had a competent cabinet, which is why he was able to govern relatively well. But he had moments where he was loopy. With Trump, I want to be able to go, Rob Noerr will never do this, but I wish he would. I want to be able to go to Rob Noerr and say, hey, man, you made hay out of the fact that Biden was fucking demented for 2 years and should not be in office as a result of his dementia. But your daddy just did something so unbelievably fucking stupid that you should effectively commit like the Japanese samurai Shane suicide. Like that's what you should do. You should do Sudoku right now.
or Seppuku or whatever.
But seppuku is the real one. But I'll never get that from him. He's just going to be quiet and walk away. But I do think that people see that. I do think people see when their favorite media pundits fight aggressively on one topic, are proven to be hypocritical on a topic, and then they walk away from the argument because they can't win it. I think people see that.
I think that they will, especially when people like Rob are self-admitting that they're hypocrites. And even in some of these statements by these conservative,
that segment was
they're like
fucking crazy, by the
wild,
way.
hey,
dude. I watched that segment, and that was like psychically painful.
Yeah, but it's just no more, no less than like what we already knew. It would be one thing to say, "Hey, I'm a hypocrite because this is my values, and I didn't live up to it, and I'm going to work to change." Right? Like that's one thing. That's not what he said. He didn't say I was a hypocrite and I'm learning from it to try to not be a hypocrite. He's apologizing in the clip that I played and in that segment. He's apologizing for not being a hypocrite enough. He's saying, I'm actually ashamed that I wasn't more of a hypocrite. So it's not this notion of like, well, you guys are hypocrites too, but at least he admits it. It's like, no, he's saying it's actually good to strive to be a hypocrite as opposed to someone who's the
closest to a steel man that I can get. Okay. The closest to a steel man that I can get is that because
why are you trying, man?
He's bought into, well, why try? Because the truth matters. He's bought into the binary. And so as a result, when you call or I call Trump fascist, we are a part of the propaganda machine that's trying to get normie conservatives killed. There's a problem here, though, is that if you try to usurp the Constitution of the United States, if you try to do the fake elector scheme, if you're a political corporatist, which I won't bore you with an explanation, but if you're a political corporatist and you're a flexible authoritarian, I think you are a fascist, or at minimum should be described as such. And so what happens is my truth, the way I genuinely perceive things, is now a call to violence against people like him. And so therefore, since I'm engaged in such bad behavior, even though I'm describing reality as I see it, therefore all bets are off and he can do whatever he wants to do. And he doesn't have to have any kind of morals system at all because I'm that bad.
I see what you're talking about there. And yeah, like maybe he thinks that, but I find it hard to believe because the fascist thing, even if you're wrong, even if we're wrong, I don't think we are. I don't think you're wrong about the application of that label to some of these figures. I don't think you're wrong about that. I don't think I'm wrong about that. I've been quick to call them that because I think it very easily fits the bill about what they're doing. They don't understand that as a call to violence. They intuitively don't understand it as a call to violence because if they did think that, and I was having this exchange with this, like, I'm sorry to say, this stupid motherfucker on Twitter, if they thought that, they would be like, okay, so Trump was calling for Kamala Harris to be killed when he called her a fascist. And Stephen Miller was
but they run away from that.
To be killed. And they never want to. They're like, the thing
they
is,
can't deal with that.
They purposely misconstrue it. They're like, oh, don't hold me to Trump's moral standards. Like, it's not about moral standards. It's not about moral cues. It's about what do these words literally mean? Do you think, regardless of whether you think he should have said it, regardless of whether you think people should be called fascist, when Trump called Kamala Harris a fascist, was he calling for her death? Because unless you're willing to apply that evenly, I think that you're admitting that it doesn't mean that you want them to be killed.
It's worse, which is crazy to me that it's worse. Okay. Charlie Kirk, one of the clips that I think is fucking insane when all the Republicans were like, oh yeah, Charlie Kirk's moderate. Oh, you killed the reasonable guy. And then the fucking clip that I saw, which by the way, it's like a clip. I say crazy shit all the time. Like if you take a 5-second clip, you're going to find plenty of reasons to kill me. But the point is that the clip that was brought was Joe Biden is such a traitor to the United States of America. He should be incarcerated for life or executed by the state. You think that's like turning down the temperature? Do you think that's a sane position to have? Do you think that Charlie Kirk would be able to articulate a single thing that like Joe Biden has done that is so terrible it warrants capital punishment by the state? He won't.
He would bring up some bullshit. He would bring up some bullshit. Now, I want to be fair to Charlie Kirk there, since you were fair to Rob Noerr. I think that Trump should go to prison for the rest of his life for his crimes. And I don't believe in the death penalty, so I wouldn't recommend that he be executed because I don't believe in that punishment as being necessary or just. And but notwithstanding that, like I do think that Trump is guilty of insurrection, and of these conspiracies that I think, were I to believe in capital punishment, I do think that it would fit the bill. Like insurrection is a form of treason. It is defined as a form of treason.
No, if you're
And it's
trying to
levying war against
overthrow the
United States.
Republic of the United States, that's people. Oh, sorry, I'm getting triggered again. The oath of enlistment. Bernie, who again I have very strong criticisms of Bernie Sanders, but he said something to the effect of, you need to remember, like he was saying to the military members who were getting deployed to Portland, he was like, you need to remember your oaths, right? Something to that effect. And there's a bunch of MAGA veterans who piss me off to no fucking end. And they're like, oh yeah, well, I remember the oath. I remember against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I'm just thinking to myself, you stupid fuck. Like the first part of the oath is like, you defer to the Constitution of the United States, not to the president. So the fact that like you would support Trump after, the fake elector scheme is fucking crazy to me. The other part of that is like, oh, so one sentence of the oath of enlistment, but you don't know posse comitatus passed in 1878. Of course you fucking don't. But at the same time, like, this is how republics die. Republics die by using law enforcement in civil issues and saying that the law enforcement in civil issues are so bad that you need to deploy the military against your own civilians. This is how republics die. And if Trump and Vance and Thiel and Yarvin and I could probably come up with another half dozen names, if they could, they would. If they could, they would.
No doubt. For Yarvin, I have no doubt. He's a lol cow, and I want to be clear.
He's tweeting about it now. He's like, yeah, we should. He's like, Trump's a pussy for not doing it.
Yeah, I mean, they're mad. The crazies are really mad that it's not going fast enough in terms of the authoritarian turn. I do want to say, even though I said it when I gave a statement, I don't believe that Trump should face capital punishment. I don't believe in capital punishment. I'm just pointing out that I think that the crime he did was serious. And just to defend Kirk a little bit, that I don't think that it's necessarily like a violent thing to say that someone should be in jail for a perceived crime. But I do think that there is no there. And so when Kirk was pointing to a crime, like what fucking crime that Joe Biden committed in their minds. And you can see it a little bit, and maybe we can end on the Comey indictment, because I think it's taken up a lot of my time recently, given how fucking preposterous it is, and reading up the theories on it. It's just because I'm interested in it. They don't actually care about the basis in law or fact regarding these flamboyant accusations towards their political enemies. I think that that's true of the Twitter files. I think that that's true of the Clinton email saga. I think that that's true of Joe Biden conspiracies. And I think now it's true with James Comey, that everyone is talking about Russiagate this, Russiagate, but the indictment has nothing to do with Russiagate. As far as we know, it relates to Hillary Clinton leaks, because the person won there identified as Hillary Clinton, not Donald Trump. But they don't give a shit. They were struggling, that is the Department of Justice in the Eastern District of Virginia, they were struggling to come up with a theory to charge Comey, which is like the reverse of how it should operate. It should operate as, you have a crime, you got to find out who done it. But now they have a person and they're trying to find out what crime he did. And it just goes to show, I think, even with Charlie Kirk and all these people, that the legal reasoning here, or the purported theory, doesn't matter to them. They just want to go after their enemies.
Oh yeah, it's the real crime is defiance to the Trump regime. That's a real crime. And so, and by the way, like a man who saves his country commits no crime. Okay, so if Donald Trump can tweet that, if Vance can support that, if Miller can support that, then if James Comey, and by the way, like, again, I don't know the specifics of the Hillary Clinton stuff, but one of the things that was brought up, even if it's not a part of the indictment, was that James Comey lied or said some shit about how many FBI agents there were on January 6th or some shit like that. I fucking forget.
He refused to give a number, by the way. And
right.
But yeah, go ahead.
Right. So they were saying, oh, that's
sorry. Comey wasn't around for Jan 6. Comey lost his job in 2017. It was something else.
I'm mixing something else.
They must be thinking of Chris Wray, maybe.
Yes, I think I was thinking of Chris Wray. But the thing is, hold on. I think it was Comey leaking a memo to a friend because Congress asked him, a congressional representative said, hey, did you leak this information? And or did you
This is what
authorize the leak of this information?
This is part of the theory of the indictment, but the thing
Right.
is, the statement is specific. It's about anonymous sources, anonymous leaks to the media
Right.
from someone at the FBI. And so, yeah, everyone knows that he talked to Dan Richman, and Dan Richman released some statements defending Comey, but that's not proving that Comey lied when he said he did not authorize anonymous leaks from
Right.
someone at the FBI. So it's a bullshit narrative.
Well, and so here's the thing. I'm going to be a dick about it a little bit, even if it's not that great of a point. If Comey genuinely thought that it was necessary for him to not authorize a leak, but for him to leak via a friend information that would allow him to defend his own position within the public in order to keep his job so he could make sure that he safeguarded the Republic of the United States of America, then I would take the he who saves his country commits no crime fucking logic. Now, of course, that's a dangerous precedent. I don't actually want to follow that logic, but how can you support all the extra legal bullshit of Trump but think that Comey deserves to be incarcerated for leaking information via a friend that he thought was necessary?
Well, let's be clear. Like, leaks are part of government strategy. Just because someone leaks something doesn't mean that it's not the good or right thing to do. In fact, no one leaks more than the Trump administrations. The first Trump administration leaked like a sieve.
I can't believe the Epstein shit hasn't come out via a leak, right? I cannot believe that Bongino and Patel have not leaked it themselves yet.
Leaked what though? That's the like at this point for the Epstein stuff.
No, you're right.
People are assuming, right?
No. You're right. So sorry. I should actually couch this. I think that if the unredacted Epstein leaks ever come to light, what's actually going to happen is there's going to be a lot of hearsay and accusations. There will be the one woman who accused Donald Trump of rape, but I doubt that there's going to be any others. And then I think that what is it? The allegations are going to be a lot of like hearsay and witness testimony and all that kind of stuff, but it's not going to be like provable. Like we're not going to have DNA evidence in reference to orgies with teenagers from 30 years ago. That's not going to exist. We're going to have the sworn written testimony of 40 girls who were trafficked by the Epstein thing, and then we're not going to be able to corroborate the actual guilt of the people who participated in the orgies.
I have no smoking gun proof that the conspiracy went beyond Maxwell or Epstein. I will say though, the thing that makes it most suspicious to me is the level of resistance that Republicans are pushing back on this effort by Ro Khanna and by Thomas Massey.
Who I'm proud of, by the way, for not breaking.
And so that I find that very suspicious because it seems to be helmed by the White House, that they're trying to pressure people, and even to the extent that Mike Johnson is holding off on confirming one of these special election Democrats from Arizona because that's the last vote they need to pass the discharge petition or whatever. So yeah, that to me is super, super duper sus. Also the lies of the administration, that makes me think that there's something really, really bad or embarrassing there. But it to me, it's like people are assuming way too much. They have this like critical pedo theory that they think that this giant cabal of pedos runs the whole country. And I think that has never been substantiated.
No, but I've probably made fairly extreme statements in the past that if you had to ask me to actually characterize it the way that I think that it was, my guess, okay, Pisco doesn't endorse, this is just me, okay? Jeffrey Epstein in the 80s, 90s, and thousands, he recruited effectively a bunch of like friends, including Alan Dershowitz, who became obsessed with like Lolita, which is like girls aged 13 to 17.
You're accusing Dersh of liking Lolita?
Of who?
Dershowitz?
Oh yeah, he wrote an op-ed in the New York Times in 1992 arguing for the age of consent to be reduced to 14.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, yeah. So basically in the 80s and 90s. So I think they all like they all argued to themselves that they should be able to do this because there's like age of consent in European countries that's like 15, 16, shit like that. And so they effectively, Jeffrey Epstein knew that he was into this. Everybody else knew that he was into this. He was a billionaire. And then he used a modeling agency with which to throw orgies for him and his powerful friends. And the only thing that I'm kind of like I'm gonna hold in reserve is the intelligence like blackmail operation, because Ghislaine Maxwell's dad is Robert Maxwell. You can research him yourself. He was an intel guy. And then I just don't have any strong evidence for it. So like I can posit, I can speculate. I don't have any strong evidence about the intel shit. It's all speculation.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, we'll have to wait and see. I don't think that that we're likely to ever satisfy the desires of the people who sort of exchange in the most radical of these theories, the most I don't know, wide-reaching conspiracies. I doubt they'll ever be satisfied with the disclosures.
I'll tell you, I probably wouldn't be, because the people that allegedly, so for instance, like Melinda Gates partially divorced her husband and said that it's because Bill Gates became obsessed with Jeffrey Epstein's private life and started hanging out with him. I don't think that we're going to find out.
Is that a public statement, or is
that's a public statement? And then I don't think we're ever going to find out anything related to Bill Gates. And then same thing with like Bill Clinton, not to throw Democrats under the bus. But several witnesses
I don't care. I don't like Bill Clinton.
They were saying
he was a bad president.
They said that there was like staff from the island who said that they saw Bill Clinton partying in the presence of young girls. Now, who knows, right? Maybe Bill Clinton's a perfect gentleman and he just hung out with the models who were on the island and they had daiquiris and they chatted about the world, and then Bill Clinton went home. Or maybe he engaged in the sex cult. That's another one that I don't expect to get resolution on.
Well, regardless, I appreciate the conversation today. I know that you're usually done by 2.
Yep.
I'm surprised at how not fiery it got. What's our ultimate disposition here? Are you saying that you think the Twitter files shows perhaps something that you wouldn't like to see, but it doesn't go so far as reaching the levels of a level of government coercion such that you would call it illegal?
It went from, in my mind, it went from one of the biggest like ethical, moral breaches of like government interest in the First Amendment to effectively jaywalking. That's what it went to. And then same thing with Hunter Biden, where the sweeping for Hunter Biden was one of the most upsetting things that, like, I don't know, in recent memory. But again, I'm comparing jaywalking to fucking murder in the Trump administration. Yeah. And so for me, like, if you get me in a corner and I didn't take my pill, my happy pill, I'm going to fight you fucking tooth and nail on the details of it. But I think in the grand scheme of things, I just have to say it's fucking small potatoes to the shit that our republic is dealing with right now.
All right, last thing, and then I'll let you go. This whole panel with fucking Prime, it feels like your role there was kind of...
I just thought you were bullying him like a motherfucker, bro.
Yeah.
You were bullying the fuck out of him.
So I think that in any other scenario, if you were a viewer, you'd be fine with me bullying like crazy lefties who didn't vote for Kamala Harris. Like, this is exactly what people said they wanted.
But I feel like
see.
That's content.
And you're coming in here like a fucking cop to be like, hey, but the whole thing is, and what I found so offensive is, you're one of the people, I'm not saying that you said that I shouldn't interact with these people, because you never said that. I want to be fair to you. You never said that. But you were one of the people saying, like, yeah, it looks like, weird.
Play nice. Play Pisco, now you're too much of a pussy. You're too much of a pussy with the lefties.
Exactly,
oh, wait, you're being too mean.
And so now I'm on a panel, and you're kind of like, don't you want to listen to Prime and hear him out? And I think you're being a dick right now. And so I just view this entire, I want there to be a reckoning from everyone who was coming at me for being like, oh, you're playing footsies with the lefties. You're pulling your punches, that they were full of shit.
Oh, that was funny.
And,
no, I didn't even think about the irony. I did not think about the irony. The irony is amazing.
It wasn't lost on me at all. And I was just like, what the fuck? I'm like that guy tugging, you know, that guy who's tugging on the one end.
On the wrong side of
so you have a super chat to me, but also giving hats off to Connor for having integrity, unlike so many in politics.
Sorry, what was that?
Someone super chatted me to say that hats off to you for having integrity, unlike so many in politics.
Dude, I'm trying. Like all I do is, right or wrong, I just try to articulate what I think is true. And what's so funny is that, like, no, dude, I can imagine being on your end and you're like, Connor, what the fuck? Like, you told me to bully the shit out of these people and now I'm doing it and now you're yelling at me for it? What the fuck is wrong with you? Okay.
You can defend yourself real quick. Because I think this is going to undermine your
Oh, that's
what
funny.
the chat just said, unfortunately, because I think it calls into question your objectivity. I
Yeah.
think that a lot of your disposition in these exchanges has to do with your personal relationships, who you like personally and who you don't. And I think that that's a lot of what's doing the work.
That's funny. No. I was gonna say that.
No, but then
what I was
isn't
gonna
that
say-
bad, right?
No,
Isn't
no.
that
What,
bad
what
to
I
be,
was
like,
gonna say.
personal relationships
Well, no,
over
dude. Number one, I'm human. Number two, I think my chat appreciates that I'm human. But no, what I was gonna say was, Pisco, when you're bullying leftists, bully leftists I don't like. You know that?
Yeah, but the thing is, I think.
But
that's
I've had a
exactly
5-year relationship with Prime. I've had a 5-year relationship with Prime. You've had a 5-year relationship with Prime.
I know. But the thing
He's
is,
not a lol cow to be milked.
First of all, I don't treat him like a lol cow. I'm going on that fucking panel to have a conversation. If he behaves in a lol cow fashion,
I don't think you were going there to have a conversation.
Absolutely,
I don't think you were going there to have a conversation.
Someone says Connor should apologize for being consistent. Thank you for super chat. I think that
no,
I think that
I think it's funnier this way.
You have honed in on the thing, and I think it's what was that issue with the Destiny conversation as well, where his community was coming after me for the lefty arc. That it has to do with personal relationships. That you've perfectly explained it. When they're hanging out with the lefties that they like, they don't care about going hard on them or whatever. I'm consistent. When I hear something that fucking offends me in front of my face, or that I'm like, that's fucking stupid, I call it out. Whether that's Aaron, whether that's Prime, whether that's fucking you. And so I'm never gonna be pulling back punches against lefties. And that entire narrative was bullshit from the start.
Okay, hold on, because I think there's something in here. So number one, I don't think at least for me, the narrative is not bullshit. I think that liberals, progressives, and leftists playing footsie with far left schizos and normalizing Hassan Piker and his whole crew or whatever, that's a genuine concern of mine. So no, that's not bullshit. Number two, when it came to that conversation, I think that one of the advantages of being on the right is that effectively, like, they do close ranks. Okay, they just do. It's a bad thing, right? It's part of what contributes to the cult of the right. It's part of what contributes to the cult of Trump. But they do close ranks, and they do execute a mission together. With the left wing, though, the reason why I didn't necessarily like what you were doing with Prime and with Ali is that while I think that Prime and Ali forward arguments that I find very fucking stupid, and I probably, yeah, I agree with you. But whether or not
more
they're
insane
right,
than what Vanguard was saying. Vanguard was saying, like, Biden could have pressured more, Biden could have signaled more.
But
it's
whether
some other
or not
shit.
you
They
think
were
their
out
arguments
to
are
see.
stupid, whether or not you think their arguments are stupid, these are the people that you have to coalition build with.
Are you serious with Prime and Ali?
Yes.
Do you understand what they were saying? They were saying, you know what Prime said before? He said, I wouldn't care if it saved the lives of 20,000 Palestinians. I still wouldn't vote for Kamala Harris. That's what he was saying. And you're saying I should coalition build. No, understand how insane this is from Connor. He says, I should coalition build with that guy instead of the lefties who actually voted for Kamala Harris, like the Vanguard. That's crazy.
No. Well, hold on. You should find out whether or not they're Marxist-Leninist revolutionaries. That's number one, what you should find out. I don't think Prime is a Marxist-Leninist revolutionary, and I don't think Ali is either. So yeah, that's what you should find out. When it comes to that's my objection to that. Dude, that's like being friends with, in my opinion, that's like being friends with the fucking jihadist terrorist. That's fucking retarded. Sorry, Abe Listler, my apologies. What was the other thing though? Hold on. Vanguard is less crazy than Prime and Ali because they voted for Biden. I don't know if that's no, I don't know if that's true.
No, for
I don't know if that's true at all.
Prime voted for Biden. But for Kamala Harris.
But I think this goes with an earlier theory. I think that most of the American public is stupid and ignorant or emotional or not very thoughtful. And so Ali is representative of the Muslims who were offended by the Democrats' perspective on Israel-Palestine to the point that they either didn't vote at all or they voted for Jill Stein. That's who he's representative of. And so what he was arguing, what I was arguing is, what kind of rhetoric works on the kind of person who's in Ali's community? And you didn't take that seriously. You basically said you're a fucking idiot. You got bad arguments.
No. Hang on. No.
That's,
you know what he did?
What I was there for, bro.
He was like, no, because you didn't. I don't know if you heard closely. Ali was like,
no, he was
talk
saying,
to me.
He was coming up with reasons why your rhetoric was ineffective, and you were like, yeah, well, you're just gonna keep coming up with reasons why my rhetoric is ineffective, so you can go fuck yourself.
No, do you know what he did? So he was in that conversation. He's like, okay, I'm someone from Dearborn. I'm a Muslim from Dearborn. How convince me to vote for Kamala? And I'm like, and the immediate thought to my head is like, Trump's gonna raise all your prices with tariffs. He's corrupt as fuck. Like that's the first thing out of my mouth. He's like, and then his response to that is, Republicans won on the economy, so next. Like, what the fuck? His whole point was
he's saying the average voter is stupid and doesn't understand tariffs.
No, that's not. No, he's basically saying don't try to convince the Dearborn Muslim community on economy because Republicans poll better on economy. And that is now making, okay, whatever happened is what will happen, or whatever like has happened, that's destined to be what the Muslim community will vote for. And then when I'm like, all right, this is he's like, no, you can't talk about the Gazan lives because Trump also appealed to them on Gaza and Israel. And so you would have lost on that. And I'm like, what the fuck? What are you asking for? And then he goes, well, Trump sat down with them for dinner or something, or they had a fucking a luncheon together, and changing the nature of the hypothetical, which was a conversation, and now it's like broader campaign strategy. And ultimately, he's saying wild shit like never have any culpability, even if you vote for an explicit genocide, even if you're an Israeli citizen voting for Bibi Netanyahu. So these people are so unhinged, so delusional, and I think actively malicious in the conversation by changing the nature of whatever whatever like demonstrative pantomime that he was trying to do. He kept changing it, and so that I think is fucking disgusting.
Okay, we're not going to agree. And by the way, I think even in the conversation I said that I agree with you descriptively. I think your arguments saying, Prime, you're a fucking lefty socialist who voted in a stupid way that has made the world infinitely worse. I think that's true. You saying, Ali, you're fucking voting for the guy who is you're mad that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris went along with Bibi Netanyahu. You either didn't vote or voted along in such a way that you have given a blank check to Israel to do whatever the fuck they want with Gaza.
They don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that at all.
Yeah, well, and I think they're idiots for not agreeing.
I know, but they're like, don't tell me Trump bad. Don't tell me Trump bad. Tell me something else. I'm like, okay,
but Trump's bad.
Some Kamala Harris policies like, oh, that's too difficult to understand. And at some point, he stops you because you're having an exchange with Doobie about something historical, but I don't even remember. He's like, you think the average person voter no? I'm like, no. Connor is making a point to Doobie right now. He's not like making a point as though you were a candidate, right? So like, so he's totally lost, and they don't care about Trump bad. I want to stress again, I told Prime, hey, Prime, if voting for Kamala would have meant that 20,000 lives of Palestinians would have been saved, I wouldn't vote for Kamala. What he's saying is, I value my virtue signal in purity over the lives of the people ostensibly that I'm here to protect and why I'm voting in the first place. So they don't care about results.
All you're telling me right now, and I'm kind of being a dick, but all you're telling me is why I fucking hate democracy. Like, once again, democracy is the worst form of governance, except for all the other ones.
I don't even know what you mean by that. I think
hold on. No. I got to make this point. Trump won by saying Trump didn't win on policy. He said, if you vote for me, good thing happen, bad thing don't happen. That was his campaign. And he fucking won. So he won. He won off of the middle school pizza every day, ice cream every day campaign.
Guys, I know it's a Churchill quote, all right? I'm saying that like I have this very narrow way of how I think of worst and best, and it's kind of the same critique I have of people using the word deserve or earn vote, and that's why we got hung up on that shit, is because I think that these are weasel words.
Okay, can you not clown mirror? Can you articulate why? Can you articulate what I said about earning a vote?
I don't think that there's a good way to articulate that distinguishes earning vote from it's my preference that you reach a certain standard according to my moral values, which I just take to be you should vote for someone according when they reach some threshold.
Yeah,
And that,
I don't think. Yeah, I don't think what I'm
that's
saying
no
is
different than should. in
Yeah,
my opinion.
I don't think that I'm going to be contradicting what you said.
Yeah.
But I'm going
Oh,
to have this
you cut out, bro.
conception.
You cut out. You cut out. Just start.
Oh.
After, I don't think I'm going to be contradicting. You cut out.
Hello. Right about now.
Yeah, you're good now. Yeah, you're good now.
Okay. So, what I articulated, which I think that this is the way a lot of people are educated about democracy, is that we choose our representatives. They are servants to us. They are accountable to us. They're supposed to cater to our desires. And so if a candidate insufficiently caters to our desires, then they cannot compel us to choose them. Now, I think that's a naive perspective on politics.
That's just the truism. Yes, of course they can't compel you, but the question, the grounding right there of earning vote just has to do with one's own moral, ethical, pragmatic standards. And what I'm not objecting to someone having that view in principle. I'm just saying when you use a term like deserve and you're trying to shift the conversation from should you have voted for this person to did they deserve my vote, I think that's the distraction. You're pretending as though deserve is doing work that should isn't doing, and it's a way, I think, a dishonest way to try to distance yourself from the choice that you made.
I don't think that's their point, though. Okay, because I don't think that they necessarily buy into. I buy into lesser of two evils. Like, I believe that shit in my fucking bones. Okay, because I think the world is a fucked up place, and regardless of whether or not you participate in it, you should morally minimize harm as much as possible. Okay, so I believe that shit. I'm saying
regardless of your ethical outlook, it's the same shit.
But what I want to say is, I think that for people who don't believe in that mindset, they earnestly think that they are teaching smug liberals like you and like Kamala and like Biden a lesson where they're saying, you lost because you did not pay me enough attention. So next time, pay attention to what I want, or you can go fuck yourself.
Oh, I agree.
That's an important sentiment in the modern American landscape.
I agree that's maybe what they're doing. I think that's stupid. You think it's stupid. We all agree that's stupid, at least between you and me.
But I also think democracy is stupid. So what else is new?
Okay. Saying something is the least bad option is saying it's the best. You know that, right? Like, I understand that it's a churchill quote. I understand it's memes, but saying something is the least best.
No, but the option is
saying
the
it's
option
the best.
is like, I brought this up, I think, in the conversation. The option is eating a sandwich filled with shit or a sandwich filled with shit and razor blades. Obviously, the sandwich filled with shit is better. It is the best of the two sandwiches available.
Right. So therefore, if something is the best, it's not the worst, right?
Well, right. But maybe we could try like bologna or spam or salami.
But if it's literally the best possibility, it's not the worst.
I agree with you.
Okay, so that's why
is they're saying,
all right,
hey, Democratic Party. This is what Ali is saying. Ali is saying, hey, Democratic Party, rather than feeding me a sandwich filled with shit and then saying, hey, the other guy is offering a sandwich filled with shit and razor blades, maybe don't put the shit in the sandwich and put salami in instead. Although I guess he's Muslim and I think salami is pork.
But then the person's just fighting the hypothetical about what's the worst, right? That if it's not the case that there's a better system there's a system that's better than democracy, then it still wouldn't be the case that democracy is the worst, because it being the worst, it's still above all those other systems. Maybe it wouldn't be the best, but yeah, I hate the quote for that reason. But two super chats, one of them directed to you, one of them directed to me. One directed to me says, Pisco fan here, but Dems coming up with justifications why they shouldn't have to coalition build. Others on the left will end with more MAGA. That was like kind of my position. My position is like, yeah, coalition build with people who are willing to vote for Democrats. I'm pretty broad tent in that respect, and I don't even understand like coalition building to be a fully coherent concept as used by people who debate me. But to the extent that it means like generally align yourself in some loose way with people who are willing to vote for your candidate, like that was my position. I'm not saying that we should not like talk to these people or should not like interact with those people. That's what people were talking to me about, and they were coming at me and saying, how are you fucking flirting with the Vanguard? And then the minute I go hard on Prime for a second, Connor comes into fucking nanny him. But so yeah, I totally agree.
Okay. I wasn't thinking of Prime, the cringe leftist. I was thinking Prime, the panel host and online friend.
Yeah, I like
That's
him.
What I was thinking about.
I like him, but I'm not gonna let personal, like if I'm having a discussion online I think that I have a responsibility to the audience to like to be a forceful representative of what I think is like the base patriotic left, the base patriotic liberal left, and that's what I try to do, even if it's someone that I like. I do like Prime. I'm gonna be honest about that. The second super chat to you: does Connor regret the soft hands he had for AJW in order to maintain bridges with him in that Twitter space from way back? Love Connor, but
I haven't even profited from that. So no, like I don't regret it. And the soft hands, all it is, like you guys have to understand, okay? I've done this for dozens of creators, okay? And shit, I might have like participated in a dogpile on Pisco right now. I've been dogpiled before. Pisco, you've been dogpiled. Does getting dogpiled suck?
Yeah, it's not fun, especially if it, like, I don't mind it if it's people who I think are honestly representing my views and who are not lying about me. It bothers me when it's like filled with lies and shit. But yeah.
So I didn't like AJW's argumentation, but I saw where I made a mistake that allowed him to double and triple down, in my view, on a bad debate. And therefore, I took responsibility for the way that I fucked up. Okay. We should have gone with a specific title and prompt that everybody agreed to beforehand. I think I gave him the specific title and prompt, but I paraphrased it in a way that I understood it. And so he was debating the paraphrased understanding instead of the like literal sentence. Yeah. And so you're from Pisco's perspective or everybody else who participated.
Oh,
in the
was
panel,
this with Lauren?
I think so. She jumped on late because she actually declined to participate. But anyways, the point is that he used my paraphrase in order to fight the argument, whereas Stephen was like, no sane person would understand this sentence to mean this thing. Therefore, you're being evasive and lying. And I didn't think that was fair. And I contributed to it. I contributed to the problem.
Well, I appreciate you coming out and saying that. Last super chat, and then we'll get you out of here. Connor has a point. You could ask Prime, how is teaching Democrats a lesson worth the death caused by electing a fascist? I think that Connor does have a point. The reason I didn't ask him about this was because that was our previous conversation about lesser of two evils. This entire conversation was not about lesser of two evil. It was me trying to like understand where they're coming from without being like, but what about Trump? What about Trump? What about Trump? What about Trump? Ultimately, there were a couple moments where we said, but what about Trump? Because we were just like analyzing, questions and setups that they were giving us. But in general, that was a setup. I do think it's effective to ask how is teaching.
Pisco.
And there was a comment in the chat as well, just one last thing, where they were like, when has this ever worked before in history? And I agree with that. Like this kind of lesson teaching doesn't seem to have any kind of historical precedent where it works.
Well, hold on. So the lesson teaching is, you'd have to check it out. It's either the Bull Moose Party, the collapse of the Bull Moose Republicans, or it's the collapse of the party system that led rise to the Republicans. But I think the Republicans were originally like a minority. They were actually like a minority caucus as a larger party. You'd have to take a look at the history. So take everything I say with a grain of salt. But what effectively happened is I think the minority party lost. And so they had to do like a complete ground up philosophical reevaluation of who they were and what they stood for. And then they started winning elections.
Yeah, but like the Bull Moose, what happened with Taft and with Teddy Roosevelt, that had to do more with like personalities and splitting the vote among the Republicans than it did like some kind of I guess maybe there's some ideological fervor behind Teddy Roosevelt as a progressive and Taft is more conservative or something. But it didn't inure to the benefit of progressives who just kind of rallied around Wilson.
Right. But I think that was I think the point though is that whoever the fucking next Republican who won was, I don't know, it could have been a fucking decade later or 2 decades later. But the point is that like created a crisis, a political crisis.
Harding, and then Coolidge, I think, were the next Republican.
Right. So, but it created a crisis within the party where effectively they knew they couldn't win, and so they had to rebuild their platform. But anyways, the thing is though, Pisco, you are a excellent arguer with, I would say, little brother energy, who can get under.
I am a little brother.
Yeah. With little brother energy, who can absolutely get under people's skin and piss them the fuck off. If you said, "Oh, I'm just trying to find out. I'm just curious. I'm just super curious about Pisco and Ali's perspective." But
I mean, Prime
once you found out, Prime and Ali's perspective. But once you found out what their perspective was,
we didn't find it out. No, we didn't find it
from
out.
curiosity. You shifted from
No.
curiosity to these people are fucking idiots,
No,
and I'm going to bully the shit out of them for the next 2 or 3 hours.
This is why it was so frustrating.
That was not an inquisition. That was not an interrogation. You found out that they hadn't grounded their axioms. They didn't linearize their thinking. And so as a result, you started ripping them to fucking shreds. And you were having a good time until I fucking called you out on your bullshit.
No. I didn't see the characterization. I think they were frustrated in our endeavors to find out the minimum it would take for them to vote for Kamala Harris.
Sure, probably because they didn't want to get cornered because they knew their audience would be fucking pissed
but
if
that's
you gave
not
them a
honest.
bar that they exceeded.
No, that's not honest. If we're asking you, hey,
sure,
what's the minimum bar? And you're like kind of being evasive and dodgy because you're afraid it might be something similar to what Kamala said.
Are they lying to you or are they lying to themselves?
Either, right? Like you should just answer the question. And if you get called on them, like, then maybe there's something else going on here. But they don't want to be called on that because the minute we get a concrete answer,
you end up in a dog pile. You answer questions honestly. Somebody linearizes the argument. They put you into a rhetorical trap. You fucking jump on the rake both feet because you're like, I'm a Giga Chad this shit. The rake fucking springs up and breaks your fucking nose. And then people are calling you like a pedophile, rapist, murdering monster on Twitter for 2 weeks. That's how it works. I don't care.
Connor,
That's
it's
fun
been like almost a year.
Shit about that.
It's been like almost a year since the 2024 election. They've thought about this. How have they not? How is it not like abundantly clear yet what the line would have needed to be for Kamala Harris to cross the minimum
because they're
threshold?
Representative of the average voter.
It's Prime Kai and Ali. They're like streamers, right? I mean, like I know Prime, he is not some average voter. He reads the news. Average voters probably are much less informed than Prime.
Okay. Well, I would say their argumentation and their lack of internal coherent philosophical grounding and their lack of linearized and their lack of linearized arguments is very similar to the average voter, even if they themselves are not the average voter.
No. This is where you're wrong. I'm not challenging them on their moral outlook. I'm merely trying to get clarity on what their position even is, right? Like that's the difference.
You
maybe
said like synonyms to me, but that's okay.
Oh, okay, no. One is like, what is your position? The other is saying your position is ungrounded or unjustified. They're two different things. Like me even inquiring and getting a clear answer on what their position is, that is different than me attacking the justification of their position. And we were having difficulty on getting what the position was.
I think they and I correctly inferred that if you ground them down to what their position was, your immediate position once they confirmed what it was, oh, that's super fucking stupid. Let me nail you to the wall.
Well, they can just bite the bullet, right? Like, so they can say, yes,
no, I agree. No, I agree. I agree with you argumentatively. It is infinitely more interesting and intellectually honest to own your bullshit.
Because they want to have
more interesting.
They want to have it both ways. They want to have the position one that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden were maximally in favor of Israel, but also that it would have taken just a slight adjustment for Harris. We weren't asking for the sun and moon. We weren't asking for anything big.
Yeah, which was probably bullshit, right? Yeah, as soon as she conceded 1 inch, they would have asked for a mile. And as soon as they conceded a mile, they would have asked for 2. And as soon as they asked for 2 miles, that wouldn't have been good enough. They would have asked for 10. Yeah, I know.
And Prime's position,
trust me, this is why I hate lefties.
Sure. And Prime's position, as far as I can ascertain it, is something like, well, if Kamala Harris had just come out and said, I love Joe Biden, but I'm going to chart a different course on Israel, Gaza, without giving specifics, that would have assuaged him and would have caused him to vote for Kamala.
I don't think that's true.
That just does not ring true to me.
Yeah, I think that's
why when he added the thing, he added that thing, which was like, as long as she's not lying. And I was like, wait. And then he soyed out that I was calling him on that, not because I think that he expected her to lie to him, but just because his inclusion of that signaled to me, oh, okay, well, you're just going to construe any statement I provide to you as clearly Kamala Harris was lying.
Well, and that was me trying to preempt BAM, because what was happening was
Yes,
You were
you should let
coming
us
up.
run that argument. Like what they were doing was to try to prevent us from using evidence to show that hey, maybe the bar that you're like that's a debate, Connor. Or is it a group therapy session or is it debate?
No, but see, that's the thing. You just gave the game away right there because you just said, "Oh, I'm just super curious. I was just doing an interrogation. I was just doing an inquisition." And right there, you're like, "Well, it's a debate, Connor. I need to nail them down on their bullshit so I can debate them."
Well, both things are true. So on the one hand, he was soying out when I was just
you were debating.
genuinely.
You were debating.
I was. So it is a debate. It is a debate panel.
It didn't need to be a debate. It could have been an honest interrogation, an inquisition, but you didn't want an inquisition. You wanted a debate.
No, I was trying to find out what they genuinely believe. Those are not inconsistent. I think that you should just
you wanted a brief interrogation and inquisition to establish how stupid their positions were.
We had 4 hours
to debate so you could bully the fuck out of them for 2 or 3 hours.
No, I mean that's a crazy interpretation. I think that we've given these guys plenty of time. Anyway, thank you so much, Connor, for joining us. I know that we've run the course. We'll talk again soon. All right.
All right. Be easy, buddy.
All right. Later.
Bye. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's late. It's time for me to go. I parasocially love you. Give me a call.